What an eventful day it has been. Yeah, and we have a lot to break down. So let's not waste any time and let's get right down to it. And let us start with the sensational report from Azimio. That principal of Azimio and the leader of the Wiper Party, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, had been put under house arrest. He was not allowed to leave his house since Tuesday, late Tuesday, so as to ensure that he would be missing in action on Wednesday, Thursday, and possibly today. This information was released by Azimio through the minority leader in parliament, Bwana Wandai. Now, before I tell you the super fascinating events that followed that revelation in very quick succession, proving that we have a lot of propagandists on behalf of the government who definitely have an objective. Before I give you that information, please stay with me, and towards the tail end of this video, I will reveal to you for the first time the main reason, the real reason why all the Azimio leaders were missing from the demonstrations this time round. It is quite a big story. Okay, I'll come to that. So please be patient. Immediately after this revelation by Azimio, stories started flying left, right, and center. In one very dramatic story on our WAB forum, there were reports that Kalonzo Musyoka had been seen in Likoni in Mombasa with Baba. Now, of course, this contradicted all the other information we have on Raila, that is under the weather, he's not feeling well. Raila himself has tweeted a few moments ago that he did not meet with diplomats, contrary to what is appearing in a section of the press. Because he's under the weather, he's not having any meetings. But I can add a small aside. It is possible to speak to people on the phone without meeting them, but those are private manenos. And let me leave it at that. Baba in Likoni, according to this information, because earlier it had been tweeted from Itumbi's account that Baba had flown with his family to Malindi on holiday, leaving the rest of the Kenyans to demonstrate. From Itumbi's handle we got that information. And of course the person who released that information forgot to remind Kenyans that Baba is under the weather. And it is quite possible that a doctor recommended a warmer climate so that he recovers quicker. Because a warmer climate also means the immune system kicks in and works much faster. That's a medical fact. The person forgot to mention that and focused on their propaganda attack on Raila Odinga. Bottom line, in these times we are living in, especially under the propaganda expert UDA government, be very careful where you're receiving information from. Don't just take in information and believe it on the spot, especially from people who have been known in the past to lie to us. I believe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't even take events that you see that may discourage you or that may want to tell you a different story. Don't take them seriously if they involve people who have a track record of being untruthful to Kenyans in the past. And of course the best example of this is that there was a very big meeting in Kericho yesterday in support of Ruto. Very successful. It had a huge crowd. So, explain to me why this morning Kericho is burning. Please explain that to me. So you see what I mean. Don't take in information wherever the source is without carefully considering the participants and of course the source of that information. Otherwise, Azimio leaders, all of them, most of them, remain harassed by this government. Bobo Wino was released and then promptly rearrested. Maina Njenga's whereabouts, the former Mungiki leader, are still unknown. The bodyguard of Raila Odinga, his whereabouts, totally unknown. I find it super fascinating that when Babu Owino and Gaucho and company appeared in court, I heard a word that I've not heard for a long time. The last time I heard this phrase or this word was during the dictatorial regime of President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. During the fight for the second liberation. I was a journalist in those days. And there were cases all the time. The courts were very busy with people charged with this word that I'm hearing now again under the Ruto administration, subversion. Now subversion is a very interesting word. Na kwa sababu kizungu ilikuja na meli, I have put in front of your screens right now what that word means. But one thing is for sure, that word is not a word that can be very comfortable under our 2010 Constitution. And that is the truth. So bottom line, we are back in the 90s when we had a dictatorial government very keen on clamping down on the opposition, very keen on dealing ruthlessly, using whatever means possible, the courts or even physical harm, to intimidate, including rearresting people who have just been released by a court of law. All those tactics are back. And there's also something else very interesting happening. According to our laws, you cannot arrest somebody and keep them in custody for more than 24 hours without charging them in a court of law. Okay? But that is exactly what happened to Babu. That is exactly what has happened to Maina Njenga. That is exactly what has happened to Raila Odinga's bodyguard. So, what is happening here? To put it in the words of one of our Kumekucha followers, the Constitution has been suspended without our knowledge. That's really what it is, because it's being ignored. You know, police have another habit of they arrest somebody, they present him in court, all right, and then they ask for more time to complete investigations. Now what is wrong with that is that why arrest him in the first place before you complete your investigations? Why? Why don't you complete your investigations? Gather enough evidence, solid evidence that you know will stand up in a court of law, and then arrest the person, so that you don't infringe on their rights, on their human rights. Constitution suspended. Yeah, we're just pretending. We're going through the motions, pretending that the Constitution is still working. It's not. Ilienda, ilisha. Yeah, at least for now. Because, for instance, it is not possible for you and I to assemble peacefully and picket and hold a demonstration. That one is no longer possible in Kenya, because you know what will happen. And so if you are a UDA supporter, a supporter of Ruto, and you want to shoot back that I'm talking rubbish, that the Constitution is still in place, explain to me why one of the fundamental Bill of Rights can no longer be exercised in the country called Kenya without one putting themselves in grave danger of injury or even death. You know, one thing that is very clear is that one of the government tactics or strategy of dealing with the maandamano was to ensure that they portray the maandamano as always being violent, as always causing damage of property, injury, and loss of life. The government has been very determined to prove to the world that that is the case. What has happened? We have seen videos. We have seen exposure in the media. We have seen irrefutable evidence which tells us that that is not the case. What does the evidence tell us? The evidence tells us that it is the police. It is goons protected by the police, political goons, paid for by government agents, who are causing all the damage, chaos, violence, etc., etc. Whenever Azimio hold a peaceful rally or a peaceful demonstration, nothing happens. No property is damaged. There is no violence. Public order is not disrupted. Okay? That should be very clear. And the super fascinating thing is that this fact has now become very clear to the diplomatic community. You know, this is where I was asking yesterday, what were these people in UDA really up to? What was the government endgame in this strategy that they picked carefully, and worked on and put resources into? What were they thinking? Because without being rude or insulting, this sounds like a situation where you pick up somebody from the village with limited exposure, limited education. They have never read the Kenya Constitution. They don't really understand legal matters very well. And you pick them and you bring them to Nairobi. And then you tell them, kazi yako ni kudeal na hii opposition. Deal now. Tunataka usimamishe maandamano. And then they do it the best way they know how. Without taking into consideration the law, the constitution, the reality of politics in Kenya, the reality of politics on the global stage. All those things hawataki kujua na hawajui na watawai kujua, because they're not capable of understanding. Not their fault. Everybody would like to go to school, but sometimes funds are short. It is not possible that they'll ever be able to understand all these things. It's not possible. You can explain to them from morning till evening, hawatashika. That seems to be the case. And yet we have people in the UDA government with PhDs. We have professors of law. So what happened? What really went wrong here? Or did they think for a second that their plan, what they were doing, would never be detected? Is that what they really thought? That nobody would ever really find out what's going on? Everybody would swallow their propaganda and their story that, oh, it is Azimio and Raila Odinga causing violence? Did they really think that? Hey. Because the very latest is that the diplomatic community seems to be getting very involved in what is happening in the country. And as I make this recording, I have credible information that a number of senior cabinet ministers and very big people, wakubwa, in the UDA Kenya Kwanza government, as of this minute, are not able to travel to the United States and are not able to travel to the United Kingdom. Travel advisory manenos. Okay? And some of the names I'm hearing being mentioned in relation to that are the following: Moses Kuria, Kimani Ichung'wah, Gashedwa, whatever his name is, and 3 other names that I can't mention because I still have to verify 1 or 2 things. Now, what does this tell you? It tells you, and it tells me, that kuna watu wameanza kurukwa. You see, people forget, the same way we have complicated Kenya politics is the same way international politics can be very complicated. In that some people can help you to steal an election, and then things get so serious that they have no other option but kukuruka. You know, I don't like the politics of a musician called Jaguar, but I love his music. Remember the hit song Kigeugeu? I'm sure you remember. I believe that is what is unfolding right before our eyes. Further evidence that the Kenya Kwanza government kwisha maneno. It is just a matter of time. It could take 6 months, it could take 1 month, it could take 1 year, but it's all over. Kwisha maneno. Because politics is the way it is, and there are some things in politics which are impossible to come back from. And the situation facing the Kenya Kwanza government right now is a classic example of one of those times when you find yourself in a political situation that is impossible to come back from. It doesn't matter if you've suspended the constitution. It doesn't matter if you're in a banana republic like Kenya, where you can make up the rules as you go along, although you have a constitution. It doesn't matter if you have government machinery on your side, full government machinery and full government power. It doesn't matter if you can send down instructions to the police to do 1 or 2 things to frustrate the opposition. All those things don't matter. The truism remains that there are some things in politics you cannot come back from. Now, very quickly on to the information I promised. And I need to give you a background first. In 2017, I believe, I created a video on this channel about how Kenya, the country called Kenya, is the most spied on country on the continent of Africa. And in the whole world, wait for this one, is number 4. Okay? And of course I discussed how that sounds unlikely, because Kenya has many allies. Yeah? And many of these intelligence services in these countries that are our allies are for us. Supposedly, they're on our side. So one would think that a most spied country would be a problem country, like Somalia for instance, or another country, but not Kenya. But that is the reality. I'll put a link in the description area below so that you catch up with that video, because it will enable you to understand a lot of things, including the fact that although Kenya is an independent sovereign state, the political reality is nowhere near that. Let me just leave it at that. But with that information I've given you about that video I did some time back, let us dive into it. According to my impeccable information, foreign intelligence services in the country warned the leaders of Azimio not to make any public appearances during the 3 days of maandamano. Why? Because they had credible information that should they do so, there was a danger that they could get injured very badly or even lose their lives. Okay? Now, in my opinion, this is information that ODM and Raila Odinga's intelligence network already had. It was not news. However, the Azimio leaders decided to take the usual precautions. Maybe you didn't know this, but usually before the other maandamanos that were 1-day maandamanos, Raila Odinga and the key Azimio leaders would normally take a few precautions, like their movements and locations would not be very easy to know. Bila kizungu mingi, they would go underground. Okay? And this time round, it was emphasized to all the leaders to ensure that if they normally go underground 1 floor, this time round they should go underground 3 floors. And I believe all the major leaders did exactly that, except one. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, who also believed they can't dare, they can't, so I'll not go underground. Well, we know what happened. Azimio have told us that Kalonzo Musyoka, for at least 2 days, was prevented from leaving his house. You know, when security forces surround your compound, and you're not allowed to leave, I believe the correct English word for that is under house arrest. And so I believe with that information, we can totally understand what has gone down during these 3 days of maandamano in the country. And of course, I'll continue in my efforts to keep you very well informed of what's happening. And I would highly recommend my blog, kumekucha.blogspot.com, where I frequently update stories the whole day and do a few analyses here and there. We have been breaking a lot of stories on that blog in recent days. And especially at a time like this, when so much is happening, and it seems that our media is not entirely free, there seems to be some sort of pressure to stop them from reporting or breaking certain stories. I believe the Kumekucha blog can be very useful for those of us who want to remain informed with what's happening. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank those of you who responded to my appeal in the last video to renew your subscriptions. The few who did, and I believe that the rest of us will follow suit and do the same, so that I'm not crippled in what I'm doing, so that I'm able to do my work and get that information out to you that you need, especially now. And for those who have already participated in the media giftings, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.